cross and isolated margin mode. You can learn more about the two modes and the differences between them in this tutorial. What are cross-margin and isolated margin? In cross-margin mode, margins are shared among all your cross-margin positions. The cross-margin mode uses the balance of your entire cross-margin account as collateral, providing you with greater flexibility to utilize your funds. Margin in the isolated margin mode is independently allocated for each trading pair. Margin level and risks are therefore also independent for each isolated margin account. If one isolated margin position is liquidated, it won't affect your other isolated margin positions. This lets you better manage risks on individual positions. You can choose cross-margin or isolated margin based on your risk tolerance and trading strategy. How cross-margin and isolated margin works? Let's take a look at the different margin mode of the two users. Assume the market price of ETH and BCH are both 2,000 USDC on day 1. User A and User B each transferred 4,000 USDC into their margin accounts as margin, and each borrowed 8,000 USDC to purchase ETH and BCH with 3 times leverage on average. User A traded in the cross-margin mode, while User B traded in the isolated margin mode. Let's see how they will turn out due to different margin modes. Please note that trading fees and interests are ignored in this example. Assure the margin call level and liquidation level are as follows. On day 1, User A traded in the cross-margin mode. User B traded in the isolated margin mode. On day 2, ETH USDC rises to 2,300 USDC, while BCH and USDC falls to 1,550 USDC. For User A, their cross-margin account remains normal. For User B, their ETH USDC isolated margin account recorded a 900 USDC profit. However, the margin in their BCH USDC isolated margin account is insufficient. A margin call is triggered for User B's isolated margin account, and they need to transfer more assets to the account as margin. On day 3, the prices of ETH USDC and BCH USDC are 2,200 USDC and 1,000 USDC respectively. User A's account is affected by the BCH USDC price drop. If User A does not add margin at this point, there is a risk that User A will lose all of the assets in their cross-margin account when the market becomes more volatile. Meanwhile, User B's ETH USDC isolated margin account is normal and has a 600 USDC profit. However, their BCH USDC isolated margin account was affected by the price drop and was forced liquidated. Although User B's BCH USDC positions were liquidated as they failed to add more margin or reduce positions in time, the liquidation of this individual isolated margin account does not affect their other accounts' profits. To summarize, cross and isolated margin modes are two different ways for margin trading, and you can choose either based on your risk tolerance and trading strategy. Experience margin trading at Binance today.